Let's bring out Elon Musk.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
Welcome to today's video, where we unpack one of the most controversial power struggles in modern governance. Elon Musk is taking on the slow-moving, money-burning force that is Washington's bureaucracy. At the center of this storm is DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, Musk's brainchild for tearing apart the bloated, broken bureaucracy, cutting waste, and forcing Washington to run like a business. But his crusade has ignited a fierce backlash, with protests erupting, party leaders and government bureaucrats pushing back, and mass layoffs shaking Washington to its core. But what exactly is happening? What role is Musk really playing? And how are the public and Washington insiders responding? And is this a necessary wake-up call for the government, or a reckless power grab? Buckle up, because we're diving into the gritty details of Musk versus the machine. On Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025, President Trump formally established the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, via an executive order, one of 26 executive orders signed by the president on his first day in office, the most of any previous U.S. president. The executive order, number 14158, was titled Establishing and Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency. The purpose of DOGE, as outlined in the order, was to modernize federal technology, software, and IT systems to maximize governmental efficiency and productivity. Despite its name, DOGE is not an official federal department or agency. Instead, it's a commission of advisors led by an administrator that reports directly to the president. This setup means that DOGE acts on the president's will and doesn't require permission from Congress in carrying out its duties, making it one of the most powerful government bodies in all of Washington. DOGE was also established as a temporary organization, charged with leading an 18-month government cleanup effort that ends on July 4th, 2026. The goal of the effort is simple: cut wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars, downsize the federal workforce, and get rid of red tape and outdated systems. Billionaire and Trump protege Elon Musk was announced as the head of DOGE. But what exactly does that mean? At first, the Trump administration made it sound simple. Musk was in charge, cutting waste and overhauling bureaucracy. But Musk's appointment was a subject of controversy, with detractors expressing concerns about possible corruption, as Musk would be auditing the very agencies that fund and regulate his businesses. And as the controversy grew, the messaging started to change. Here's Trump's press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, addressing the issue.
Clarify what Elon Musk's role is. In a court filing last night, the Trump administration said he has no formal authority to actually make decisions. We know he's a special government employee, but is he making decisions? How does that process work with him at the helm of DOGE?
First of all, President Trump is the ultimate decision maker for this entire administration. Elon Musk, just like everybody else across the federal government, works at the direction of President Trump. Elon Musk is a special government employee, as I have told you before. He serves as a senior advisor to the president, if you will.
So is Musk really running DOGE? Does he have official authority, or is he just an advisor? And why was the White House now dodging direct answers about his role? Here's Musk and Trump.
I think the way to think of me is like I'm a technologist, and I try to make technologies that improve the world and make life better.
Your shirt.
Yeah, and that's why my T-shirt says tech support, because I'm here to provide the president with technology support.
The confusion seems to be partly about titles. As mentioned, DOGE is not an actual government department or agency. It is in fact a special advisory commission to the president. Musk might be better thought of as the chair of that commission, recommending actions to be taken at the president's discretion. But this isn't just about titles. Detractors and Democratic Party leaders warn that Musk's leadership creates a massive conflict of interest. They suggest he might have a hidden agenda behind his crusade against bureaucracy, specifically to gut the federal agencies and alter the regulations that affect the growth of his businesses. Here's Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren attempting to make that case.
Elon Musk, as you know, he bought Twitter, and he's just lost money hand over fist on that investment. So he's had a better idea, better from his perspective, and that is he's going to do X money. And the idea here is he's going to be everything on the financial side and social side for everybody in the country, maybe around the world if he gets the chance. There's just one bump in the way, and that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's not that they say no. You can go ahead and build a new tech platform, a financial system, good for you. But you've got to follow the basic rules of not cheating people, not lying to people, and not sucking up their personal data and selling it to somebody else. Yeah. He doesn't like that. So he's announced he's going to do X. What a great idea. Move the bump out of the way before you start. You know, it's a little like a bank robber saying, oh, before I go into the lobby with my sacks that I'm ready to fill up, I'm just going to fire the cops. Yeah. And now I'll go in and take the money.
In other words, what Democratic Representative from New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, stated more bluntly,
Elon Musk is not a scientist. He is not an engineer. He is a billionaire con man with a lot of money.
But Trump denies any conflict of interest and has resisted media attempts to drive a wedge between him and Musk.
Mr. President, given your concerns about corruption, you said that if there were any conflicts of interest with Elon Musk, you wouldn't let him anywhere near it.
That's right.
DOGE and SpaceX employees are now working directly at the Federal Aviation Administration and the Defense Department, agencies that have billions of dollars in contracts with Musk's companies or that directly regulate his companies. How is that not a conflict of interest?
Well, I mean, I'm just hearing about it, and if there is, and he told me before I told him, but obviously I will not let there be any conflict of interest. He's done an amazing job. They've revealed, in fact, he's going to be on tonight, a big show called Sean Hannity at 9 o'clock, and he's on and I'm on, and we talk about a lot of different things. And any conflicts, I told Elon, any conflicts, you can't have anything to do with that. So anything to do with possibly even space, we won't let Elon partake in that.
Regarding Musk's possible conflict of interest, Trump seems to be in a bind, as Musk might be the best man for the job.
I wanted somebody really smart to work with me in terms of the country. Something that had an effect on me was when I saw the rocket ship come back. And he said, you know, you can't really have a rocket program if you're going to dump $1 billion into the ocean every time you fly. You have to save it. Right. And he saved it. First time that I've ever seen that done. Now, nobody else can do it. If you look at the U.S., Russia, or China, they can't do it, and they won't be able to do it for a long time. He has the technology. So I wanted to find somebody smarter than him. I searched all over. I just couldn't do it. Yeah. I couldn't. You
really tried hard.
I couldn't find anyone smarter, right? So we had it for the country.
But this is the thing.
We settled on this.
Well, thanks for having me.
In his joint address to Congress on March 4th, Trump cleared up all suspicions regarding Musk's role and seems to address the controversy surrounding his possible conflict of interest.
I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everybody here, even this side, appreciates it, I believe.
The DOGE team, now indisputably headed by Musk, consists of about 40 people who worked in various ways with Musk's companies. Notably, at the center of Musk's team is a group of Gen Z young geniuses, 19 to 24 years old, with little to no government experience, highlighting Musk's focus on innovation. DOGE collaborates with and oversees federal agencies in a number of ways. Each federal agency gets a 4-person DOGE team, which is granted full access to agency records, software, and IT systems. DOGE assesses agencies' operations, for example, like payment systems, and facilitates collaboration with leading technology firms to update these systems, including leveraging the power of AI. DOGE personnel also have the authority to review the spending of each agency and work with agency representatives to comb through existing contracts, grants, and expenses to identify and eliminate wasteful and/or fraudulent spending. The issue of wasteful government spending in particular has become a flashpoint in DOGE's efforts, reaching a fever pitch during Trump's first joint address to Congress.
Just listen to some of the appalling waste we have already identified. $22 billion from HHS to provide free housing and cars for illegal aliens. $45 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion scholarships in Burma. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 million for making mice transgender. This is real. $1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams. Have you ever heard of her? $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Asia's doing very well with learning. I don't know what we're doing. We should use it ourselves. And $101 million for DEI contracts at the Department of Education, the most ever paid, nothing even like it. Many more have been found out and exposed and swiftly terminated by a group of very intelligent, mostly young people, headed up by Elon, and we appreciate it. We found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud.
DOGE has also been busy slimming down the federal workforce, and though no official figure has been provided regarding the total number of federal workers laid off as a result of DOGE's efforts, DOGE has been linked to over 280,000 layoffs across 27 agencies between February and April 2025. In his joint address, President Trump took direct aim at the bureaucracy and the presumably lazy, power-hoarding bureaucrat.
Meanwhile, we have hundreds of thousands of federal workers who have not been showing up to work. My administration will reclaim power from this unaccountable bureaucracy, and we will restore true democracy to America again. And any federal bureaucrat who resists this change will be removed from office immediately. Because we are draining the swamp. It's very simple. And the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over.
As part of Trump's concern for efficiency and accountability in the government, the administration has taken a hard stance against remote work for federal employees, with the president signing an executive order on his first day mandating that federal employees return to the office or be fired. DOGE has played a key role in implementing the order, working with agencies to track attendance and identify remote positions to be eliminated. However, Musk, a longtime critic of remote work, took it a step further, with DOGE sending an email via the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, to nearly 2 million federal employees demanding a report on their weekly accomplishments by midnight. Those who failed to respond, he warned separately via X post, would be considered as having resigned.
Elon Musk directed federal employees to answer an email from the Office of Personnel Management. The email wants them to list 5 things they accomplished at work last week.
And Elon Musk justified his email, the DOGE email rather, saying, quote, "The reason this matters is that a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work that they are not checking their email at all. In some cases, we believe non-existent people or the identities of dead people are being used to collect paychecks. In other words, there is significant outright fraud."
But Musk's email drew pushback from federal agencies, with some, including at the Department of Defense and Health and Human Services, instructing their employees to ignore the email.
The Pentagon telling employees, look at this, please pause any response to the OPM email titled, "What did you do last week?" Then FBI Director Kash Patel emailed his employees, quote, "When and if further information is required, we will coordinate the responses. For now, please pause any responses."
Health and Human Services is saying, he says staff just got an email saying there is no HHS expectation that staff respond to the Musk email. The email says, assume that what you write will be read by malign foreign actors. So an interesting response there from HHS.
Musk also drew criticism from party leaders, even on the Republican side, who questioned whether Musk and DOGE had the authority to make such demands or to threaten firings.
If I am your supervisor, I have every right to ask you to articulate what you have done this past week. These people received letters from, or emails from the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, somebody 4,000 miles away that doesn't have the slightest idea what that individual's responsibility is on a daily basis. The intimidation, if you will, that deliver these 5 bullets by Monday at noon or you lose your job. Again, if you want accountability, let's ask for accountability. But let's do that through the proper chain. I was pleased when I saw the newly confirmed head of the FBI, Mr. Patel, Director Patel, saying, no, put a pause on that request. As the director, I will be the one that will ask you for your input, your reviews. That's the way it should be done. And so, again, there is a way to do this that is proper, that is lawful, and also treats our federal employees with a little bit of dignity.
Facing scrutiny, in a second email, Musk would extend the deadline for workers to send their list of accomplishments. But this would do little to help, prompting the Office of Personnel Management to step in and clarify that it was agency heads, not DOGE, that would be responsible for reviewing performance and initiating termination. All of this amounted to what appeared at best to be Musk's sloppy handling of his new public duties, and at worst, a wanton disregard and disdain for federal workers.
Tell me what you did last week or get fired. No, don't do that. Yes, do that. If you don't, then you're fired or semi-fired. But wait, it was all just a test and you failed. Are you confused? Because I am. I was confused trying to write that today.
It's completely inhumane what he's doing, by the way. And quite frankly, it's crazy that this is his approach.
We are seeing real crises that Elon Musk, who's a billionaire who never has to think about where his next meal is coming from.
Despite the backlash over the email debacle, Trump has remained steady in his support of Musk.
Do you think that DOGE could benefit from more streamlined communications? There was that email telling employees to give 5 things that they've done last week. Agency heads then told people to ignore it. But
You're talking about the last email that was sent where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great. Because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist.
Seeming to share Musk's concern about fraud in the government, President Trump actually praised the email and encouraged even more aggressive action. And what began as a one-time request has now become a weekly mandate, illustrating the Trump administration's push for accountability. Musk's email saga set the tone for DOGE's broader crackdown on the federal workforce. Trump and Musk signaled that they weren't afraid to make bold, sweeping changes, framing them as necessary to eliminate fraud, waste, and inefficiency and get the U.S. on the right track. But federal workers, unions, and lawmakers aren't backing down without a fight. And with each move that Trump, Musk, and DOGE has made, there's been pushback. For example, as Musk was asking federal workers to justify their positions, the new administration was cutting jobs in other ways. A buyout program, or the deferred resignation program, was announced shortly after Trump took office, and it offered financial incentives to federal workers in exchange for voluntary resignation. But things got heated just before the deadline.
Tonight, just hours ahead of the White House deadline, a federal judge has paused the Trump administration from implementing its buyout program for all federal workers. That buyout offer, part of the president's campaign pledge to save taxpayer money by slashing the federal workforce. But labor unions went to court to block it, arguing it violated multiple laws.
But lawsuits in many cases have proven to be just a temporary palliative. And in the case of the buyout program, the suit would only extend the deadline, and a federal judge would ultimately rule that the program continue. This is in part because the pushback lacked proper coordination.
Press Secretary calling the decision the first of many legal wins for the president. But the judge did not weigh in on whether the program is legal, instead arguing the unions that brought the lawsuit don't have standing because they are not directly impacted, stating this is not sufficient.
In fact, just as Musk's handling of the administration's efficiency agenda would at times be sloppy, pushback from progressive lawmakers and politicians has often lacked a clear direction, let alone a legally defensible justification, essentially creating roadblocks for the sake of them. Roadblocks that, instead of stopping the Trump and Musk agenda, has just barely slowed it down.
It wasn't all good news for the administration's buyout plan.
That's right, Marking News Nation has confirmed 75,000 federal workers, that's less than 4% of the federal workforce, accepted President Trump's buyout program, but that's short of the 5 to 10% goal that was laid out by the White House. Now, unions had warned employees against taking the deal, and Democrats warned the government could go back on its word.
But these voluntary measures would only be the start. Next up, the Trump administration, via the Office of Personnel Management, ordered the dismissal of nearly all probationary federal workers. The probationary period is essentially an extension of the job application process in the federal government. Probationary workers are federal employees still within their trial period, typically about 1 year, before gaining full civil service protections. These employees can be dismissed more easily than fully credentialed career federal workers. In other words, they are the low-hanging fruit. The order led to mass layoffs of such workers, totaling approximately 20,000 workers across 18 agencies. The pushback to the order has been strong and swift.
Hey, ho, ho, civil servants will not go.
Elon Musk has got to go.
You should be respected, not rejected. You should be lifted up, not torn down. You should be embraced, not discarded. And we will stand with you until you get the dignity and respect that you deserve.
Critics argue that the mass firings did not in fact reflect a concern about performance as stated, but was part of an ideological purge, disproportionately targeting agencies that were not part of the Trump administration's political agenda, and at the expense of public health, safety, and a host of social and human services.
I've been hearing from federal workers that they believe these firings are indiscriminate, that they have not been targeted, and they believe that the government is essentially taking a chainsaw, cutting out these probationary workers, even if they're serving in critical roles. If we're no longer there to create the maps that air traffic controls are using, so this is an employee who was working on the team responsible for producing these air traffic navigation maps, this person goes on to say that, quote, mistakes will eventually happen. Inside the FAA, there's a lot of fear for public safety given these layoffs. And this is something that I'm hearing at other agencies as well, including the Department of Health and Human Services, at the FDA, people who are responsible for ensuring the health and safety of Americans.
And in a rare reversal, in March, a San Francisco federal judge issued a preliminary injunction suggesting that the firing of probationary workers violated federal law and ordering for the reinstatement of thousands of these probationary workers at 6 agencies. However, the Trump administration issued an appeal, and in an upset, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the administration. And just like in the case of the buyout program, the court ruled on a technicality.
It's whiplash here in Washington, Diane, and that now the Trump administration can proceed with the termination of those workers. The judges basically at the lower court, Diane, never questioned the government's power to fire these workers. It was just how it was done. But the Supreme Court today said actually these labor unions don't have standing to even take on that challenge. They said that these groups had not shown enough evidence that they are directly harmed to be able to bring this case. And so for now, even as the litigation moves forward, these workers will be off the job effective immediately going forward.
As mentioned, the lawsuits filed by federal employee unions in response to the Trump administration's government cleanup have largely come up short, garnering only limited success in the most progressive district courts, leading some to describe the lawsuits as baseless acts of Trump derangement on part of unions and activism on part of liberal federal judges. But outside of these isolated rulings, the courts have been mostly unsympathetic. Whether this signals that the legal pushback lacks merit or that the conservative majority Supreme Court is paving the way for Trump's downsizing agenda remains a matter of interpretation. But either way, the road is clearing for DOGE and Musk to keep swinging their chainsaw. DOGE's more direct attempts to audit federal agencies has also been met with pushback, often litigious, playing out in the courtroom or under the threat of lawsuits. Critics of Musk's approach suggest that he's moving too fast, without enough care, with some calling for a scalpel instead of a chainsaw in cutting government waste. DOGE's deep cuts to the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, and later the Department of Education, would serve as rather extreme examples of slashing government waste, setting off a firestorm of controversy and concern, not only about how DOGE and the Trump administration were approaching the matter of government efficiency, but the deeper motivations and political agendas behind said approach. In their public remarks, Trump's camp was clear regarding how they felt about USAID.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out.
USAID is a bowl of worms. There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing.
You look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government. Thank you, guys.
It's important to note that many of the Trump administration's claims about USAID spending have been scrutinized. Fact checkers have pointed out that several of the cited programs were not directly funded by USAID, nor did they necessarily funnel money to foreign governments. Instead, many were cultural initiatives run in partnership with U.S. embassies and were often spread out over multiple years. Not to mention, in the grand scheme of things, the projects highlighted represented a small sum of money. USAID as a whole managed about $40 billion in fiscal year 2023, an amount that is less than 1% of the total federal budget. So why the focus on USAID? The Trump administration's hyper-focus on USAID, to some, suggests an attempted political spin job, essentially an attempt to reframe an ideological bias toward various forms of DEI as a concern about fraud and waste in the government. But at what cost? Detractors say that in lieu of USAID diplomatic and humanitarian efforts, many regions will be more vulnerable to becoming destabilized and open to the influence of foreign enemies like Russia and China. Still, some suggest that the financing of agencies like USAID, which nearly doubled NASA's budget in fiscal year 2023, is outsized relative to its importance. In March 2025, the administration announced that it would dismantle USAID, transferring most of its duties onto the State Department. Thousands of employees were terminated. But a federal judge stepped in, ruling the move likely violated the Constitution, as Congress had not authorized the closure. A preliminary injunction temporarily halted further cuts. However, just weeks later, and following a now familiar pattern, a federal appeals court lifted the injunction, allowing DOGE to move forward. While the Trump administration has loudly targeted agencies like USAID for downsizing or elimination, it's important to note that dismantling a federal agency outright requires the approval of Congress. What DOGE is able to do is aggressively defund, restructure, or reassign an agency's functions, effectively sidelining it but not abolishing it in the legal sense. Constitutional questions aside, waves of legal challenges, what some have called lawfare, will continue to be the knee-jerk response to the Trump administration and DOGE's agenda.
Democrats today are angry at the voters for re-electing Donald Trump and electing a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and they engaged in lawfare to stop democracy from operating.
You don't need to be some soothsayer or the oracle at Delphi to understand that there's something amiss here.
Are you surprised at some of the legal efforts and some of the judges that have weighed in? There's about 8 or 10 now of these cases that are at least temporary holds. They're being challenged by the DOJ.
Right.
Are you surprised by that pushback?
Well, it's the D.C. Circuit is notorious for having a very far-left bias. And when you look at the people close to some of these judges, where are they working? Oh, they're working at these NGOs. Oh, they're the ones getting this money. Does that seem like a system that lacks corruption? It sounds like corruption to me.
In other words, the Republican line is that judicial pushback to government audits is, at best, Trump-deranged activism, and at worst, a sign of corruption, with liberal judges protecting friends and allies that are profiting off taxpayer dollars. But from the left, alarm bells haven't stopped. Critics argue that the Trump administration and DOGE are overstepping their authority, raising serious concerns about the privacy and data security of everyday Americans, ethics, and causing potential harm to essential public services.
Musk and his loyal crew of DOGE minions have wreaked havoc on the federal government, infiltrating more than a dozen agencies and departments, effectively ransacking them over the objections of the people who actually know what they do.
A former Biden-era USAID official tells the Post that, quote, her former USAID team of 60 people working on disease response had been cut to about 6 staffers as earlier this week. She added that the infrastructure left in place after Elon Musk's slash and burn approach to USAID is now, quote, a tenth of what it was. And there are emergencies unfolding around the world as we speak.
They've upended security protocols, gained access to sensitive information, fired civil servants, and canceled government contracts. Nothing fishy sounding there, everyone. As one cybersecurity expert told the New York Times, their raid on the Treasury Department represents the most consequential security breach in American history. That's how he described it. Reporting from Wired states at least one Musk-aligned official had the ability to change the code of the Treasury's payment system, which also feels important to me.
I'll tell him to go here, go there. He does it. He's got a very capable group of people.
One of those people, a young former SpaceX employee named Marco Velez, who resigned this week after a Wall Street Journal report linked him to a series of racist posts on social media, including, "I was racist before it was cool," "You cannot pay me to marry outside my ethnicity," and "normalize Indian hate."
These broader criticisms about ethics, data privacy, and the disruption of vital services would come into sharp focus in the case of the Social Security Administration. DOGE's inquiry into the Social Security Administration quickly became a centerpiece of the Trump administration's campaign against government inefficiency, framed as a prime example specifically of fraud in the government. The investigation tapped into and seemingly confirmed longstanding public concerns about identity theft and familiar tropes of welfare abuse, making SSA an easy political target. The Social Security Administration came into the spotlight in DOGE's fight against fraud when Elon Musk, in a joint interview with President Trump in the Oval Office, announced that his inquiry into the agency's databases found beneficiaries aged over 100 years, suggesting that these presumably deceased individuals were still receiving payments.
Cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone that's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, you know, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information?
with Elon Musk estimating there are about 60 million more Social Security numbers issued than there are Americans, saying, quote, there are far more eligible Social Security numbers than there are citizens in the USA. This might be the biggest fraud in history.
Elon Musk taking a peek into Social Security. Apparently, over 20 million recipients are listed as being above the age of 100, with one being listed between the ages of 360 and 369 years old. I would like to eat what that person is eating.
Oldest person alive right now in the world is 116 years old. So this is either a smoking gun for fraud, or as Elon Musk joked, vampires could be real.
Like one of the key tricks that the fraudsters pull is that they will use the fact that someone is marked as live, and as sort of just that Social Security number is marked as live in Social Security, and then get disability and unemployment insurance for a dead person. They do terrible things. They actually will see that a kid's been born. They will steal that kid's Social Security number and then take out a loan and leave that kid with a bad credit rating. There was literally a baby. This is happening all the time at scale.
These findings ignited a firestorm, and as Musk continued his inquiry into the doings of various federal agencies, criticism arose regarding DOGE's access to sensitive information, with those critical of DOGE's efforts, including progressive lawmakers, media outlets, and federal labor unions, suggesting that DOGE's activities violated federal privacy laws.
A lawsuit by a coalition of labor unions argues, quote, DOGE seeks to gain access to sensitive systems before courts can stop them.
19 states sued the Trump administration for giving Musk and his allies virtually unfettered access to sensitive personal data, including Social Security numbers and bank account information of millions of Americans. The lawsuit argues the expanded access poses huge cybersecurity risks and accuses Musk of attempting to block federal funds from reaching beneficiaries who do not align with the president's political agenda.
The henchmen, the Musk henchmen, were going in there to cut off payments they didn't like. And the reality is Musk is about subverting the Constitution. He's already got access to Social Security, financial data, health data, you name it. And I think people need to know that these are the elements of a coup.
These lawsuits and their associated criticisms led to an initial wave of rulings that largely followed a now familiar pattern, with temporary restraining orders blocking DOGE's access, only to be overturned or narrowed on appeal. Still, many on the left would continue to sound the alarm on what they saw as a political agenda disguised as a concern for efficiency, warning that Musk and the Trump administration intended to destroy the social safety net.
Social Security has never missed a payment in more than 80 years, but your benefit checks might not show up next month. You're going to see the system collapse and an interruption of benefits. I believe you will see that within the next 30 to 90 days. He added, people should start saving now.
It's absurd that Elon Musk is trying to eliminate billions of dollars from Social Security.
Elon Musk and President Trump have set their sights on cutting Social Security.
Their goal is clear: destroy Social Security from within.
Musk has remained adamant that his efforts at the Social Security Administration and elsewhere will in fact benefit everyday Americans, suggesting that criticisms from the left are just baseless slander.
How do you reassure people that what you all are doing is not going to affect their benefits?
No, in fact, what we're doing will help their benefits. Legitimate people, as a result of the work of DOGE, will receive more Social Security, not less. I want to emphasize that. As a result of the work of DOGE, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money, not less money.
All right.
I want to emphasize that point and let the record show that I said this.
But DOGE's work at the Social Security Administration has not been without its challenges. And initial bumps along the road after DOGE led cuts of nearly 7,000 employees at the Social Security Administration, for some, foreshadowed worse to come.
Washington Post, the Social Security Administration website crashed 4 times in 10 days this month because the servers were overloaded, blocking millions of retirees and disabled veterans from logging into their online accounts. Freaked people out. Is that going to change?
Yes, we're going to make sure that the website stays online.
Yeah. I mean, but is it a result of going in there or something you're doing?
As you can see, Musk has remained quick to push back against criticism of Doge, particularly from the left, defending his leadership, intentions, and the results so far. But the scrutiny hasn't stopped. On the ethics front, media outlets have raised serious questions about the individuals Musk has brought on board to help carry out his government reform agenda.
Musk's teenage henchman, Edward Korestein, is now posted to the department's Bureau of Diplomatic Technology. He'd like to be known by his juvenile online pseudonym. It's online, you can see it on the screen, but he's better known for being busted in a previous job for leaking company secrets. Not a lie, that is the truth. As the Washington Post reports, officials now worry that his position might give him a foothold for obtaining unauthorized access to classified material and obtain compromising information on other countries and foreign activities.
These are middle-aged and all but one of them a white man. They include Steve Davis, CEO of Elon Musk's Boring Company, a tunnel drilling company, Joe Gebbia, the Airbnb co-founder, Brad Smith, the healthcare entrepreneur, and others. But it's interesting, very interesting that these are the men surrounding Musk.
Musk and the Trump administration's defense of a staffer who resigned after racist social media posts resurfaced has only deepened concerns about Doge's leadership, especially its lack of racial and gender diversity. For many critics, it reinforced fears that the team driving this government overhaul reflects a narrow and exclusionary vision of society.
Vice President J.D. Vance defending the staffer, writing, "I obviously disagree with some of Velez's posts, but I don't think stupid social media activity should ruin a kid's life, so I say bring him back." Musk responding, he will be brought back. To err is human, to forgive divine.
Mutiny in Doge, and particularly the resignation of 21 holdover staffers of the former U.S. Digital Service, which was the federal agency that was consolidated into Doge, furthered concerns about ethics.
21 Doge employees signing a letter announcing their resignation en masse. And in that letter, they're very specific, saying, quote, "We will not use our skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize American sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize Doge's actions."
The departure of these staffers, of course, leaves Musk and his handpicked team at the helm of Doge, further intensifying concerns about his control and the potential conflicts of interest. Musk and Doge would also continue to experience public missteps and miscalculations, which would feed widespread concerns about the pace and execution of the government cleanup effort, and theories about Musk and Trump's underlying political goals. Regarding pace and execution, Musk and Trump's abrupt gutting of USAID threatened vital services needed to prevent public health crises.
We will make mistakes. We won't be perfect. But when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola, Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption.
There was no interruption. Washington Post today fact-checking those comments with this, quote, "Current and former USAID officials said that Musk was wrong. USAID's Ebola prevention efforts have been largely halted since Elon Musk and his Doge allies moved last month to gut the Global Assistance Agency and freeze its outgoing payments," they said. The teams and contractors that would be deployed to fight an Ebola outbreak have been dismantled. While the Trump administration issued a waiver to allow USAID to respond to an Ebola outbreak in Uganda last month, partner organizations were not promptly paid for their work, and USAID's own efforts were sharply curtailed compared to past efforts to fight Ebola outbreaks.
The fact that a rushed attempt to cut USAID foreign aid programs could have theoretically resulted in a wider outbreak of Ebola, possibly even on U.S. soil, underscore critics' argument that Musk and the Trump administration's stated concern for efficiency and the welfare of Americans has fallen victim to a reckless political crusade. The charge of recklessness would continue to plague the Doge effort, taking on new life after glaring miscalculations in reported savings at agencies like USAID and the Social Security Administration began to surface. These figures, prominently published on its infamous wall of receipts, were quickly flagged, fueling criticism that Musk was not just sloppy, but potentially misleading the public.
Doge deletes billions more from list of savings. The subheadline reads, "For the second time in a week, Elon Musk's government overhaul effort updated its wall of receipts to remove mistakes that inflated its success.
What DOGE calls its wall of receipts. Basically, it's a list of contracts that it's claiming credit for having cut and the savings it says it achieved by cutting them. It's really the only place where they show their work at all. The only time they ever show us how they get to the numbers they claim for the savings. So you can go down this list and you can see the details of these contracts.
So this ICE contract that they said was worth $8 billion, actual worth was $8 million. So from a B to an M. It's a big difference. USAID contract,
times, right?
Yeah, USAID contract nearly $2 billion. It's actually just $18 million. The Social Security Administration $232 million, actually just $560,000. Those are incredibly off numbers. How do they get to $8 billion when it's $8 million? Is it just a typo?
Yeah, in that case, it's believed it actually was a typo, that there was either they had scanned the information wrong or they're looking at an old version of the contract that was erroneous that added those 3 extra zeros to it. It is both sloppiness and overeagerness to try and show a big number that's leading to this, when at the same time, there's no reason to do it this fast, right? Like, I think it's really important to come back to that point. Like, there is a way to do this where you're actually being careful and attentive and not just firing people willy-nilly and not just slashing contracts by doing a keyword search in the actual documentation and being deliberate about it. But that's not the approach that they're taking.
Well, what it is part of a pattern, right? We're looking in these, this is, I said, the one place where you can see DOGE show its work. And we're looking in there to see, are they competent? Do they know what they're doing? When they're looking at government contracts, which again, that's the job they're out there to do, is to change the government, to overhaul it, to make it efficient. Do they understand the government itself and how it works? And the errors we're finding them making, I mean, you mentioned some of them, confusing millions with billions, triple counting the same contract, counting contracts as canceled that had actually been canceled long before. Those aren't like difficult things to spot. And it speaks to sort of a carelessness or just a lack of familiarity with the government that they're now basically in charge of.
Escalating further, some would suggest that there was something more serious behind these errors in DOGE's stated savings.
Is it a simple mistake on their part, or is it deceptive?
No, this is the second time now that they've just updated the website to delete most of the largest cuts that they claimed.
These were the biggest cuts that they were claiming turned out to be false, or reported multiple times.
Yeah, last week they cut the top 5 cuts they were claiming. Just last night they cut 5 of the top 7 cuts they were claiming. So these aren't little things with a few dollars. These are billions and billions of dollars that just vanish off their website, and again, with no explanation.
And so no one should have any confidence in any of this.
So is much just sloppy, or are they fudging the numbers to turn DOGE into a successful front for a hidden agenda? Certainly suspicious, there's a growing sense that those in the Trump camp are inflating reports of waste and fraud to justify sweeping cuts.
There has been extensive fraud, particularly if you look at Social Security. In fact, according to an IG report from the Social Security Administration, there was $71 billion worth of fraud in one single fiscal year that we know about. And so that is a lot of fraud, Peter, that the government has admitted to. So this administration is committed to finding even more of that fraud, waste, and abuse.
To be clear, that $71 billion was from 2015 to 2022, so it wasn't in just 1 year. And it was
$71 billion.
But it wasn't in 1 year, just to be clear.
In one report.
And it was in one report over multiple years, from 2015 to 2022.
So are you defending $71 billion in fraud, Peter? That's a lot of money, far too much, and that's why this administration, why is the media so against cutting waste, fraud, and abuse from the government?
On that question, even some of the loudest voices on the left have struggled to clearly articulate their skepticism of the DOGE effort, falling short of pinpointing exactly what Musk's hidden agenda might be.
I think they should get Elon Musk out of there messing with any of our departments.
But we long to be, don't you want to be accountable to what's happening with the homeless and everyone that is out on the streets, we want the people that have mental illness?
We don't want a non-elected man appointed by the president to start making people go home, lose their jobs, and all of that.
How can they lose their They're going to have more money to hire than someone else.
Oh, no, he's tricking you. You're getting fooled.
I'm a Trump supporter, and I love what President Trump is doing. Yo amo a Presidente Trump. Es un presidente, el mejor presidente. Y la comunidad hispana and African American should know. What do you tell the American people?
It's not always clear whether the objection is to Musk, the means, or just the matter in general. On the latter, the Trump administration's aggressive stance on government waste echoes concerns long held by both parties. In fact, fighting bloated bureaucracy was once a hallmark of liberal reform movements.
If we're going to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare, it does mean we're going to cut some of that out. And when I hear my friend Dave Camp say you cannot cut money out of Medicare, well, we don't want to cut the good stuff that you point out, or add the prevention. But if we're going to, if what Senator Coburn says, that 1/3 of Medicare doesn't go to patient care, you can't just get up there and say, we don't want to cut anything out of Medicare. We want to cut the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. And I think that's where we can find common ground.
The claim that Musk is using Doge to benefit his business empire has become somewhat less compelling over time. While companies like SpaceX could be well positioned to win federal contracts under the Trump administration, Musk's high-profile role in Doge so far appears to be more of a liability than an asset to his businesses. Take Tesla, for example.
How are you running your other businesses?
With great difficulty.
Tesla taking a hit over Elon's dealings with Doge, with the stock falling nearly 30% over the last month. But it's not just the stock. Tesla charging stations set ablaze in Massachusetts over the weekend. This person threw a Molotov cocktail at a Tesla dealership in Oregon.
I mean, really, this is fundamentally a case of terrorism. It's wide-scale domestic terrorism with the purpose of intimidation, and it's harming innocent people. It's really terrible.
And not to mention protests outside of Tesla dealerships around the country. And
Sheryl Crow waving goodbye in a big production and saying goodbye to her Tesla. If Elon Musk is looking to raid the government and steal for more wealth, it's not going well for Elon Musk. Year to date, since he's joined in helping the administration to the Department of Government Efficiency, he's lost almost $103 billion in net worth. His current net worth is $324 billion. That's down from well over $400 billion at the beginning of this year.
Regarding his motivations for taking on this personal risk, Musk is mostly sticking to his story.
I'm just here trying to make government more efficient, eliminate waste and fraud, and so far we're making good progress, actually.
Overstatement of that progress, then, if we take Musk at face value, might just be honest mistakes. And some have even suggested that exaggeration is just part of Musk's personality.
Now they're talking about Social Security.
Yeah.
And that people are receiving Social Security that are 150 years old. But I don't think that is the reality as it's being explained by people who understand. Because some guy who understands it was explaining that if certain factors aren't taken into consideration or certain things aren't entered in, you know, like date of birth or when there's certain things,
or date of death, or,
right? But it doesn't even necessarily mean that all these people are receiving checks.
Yeah.
That's the problem with being hyperbolic. Whatever the real reason behind Doge's inflated savings claims, Musk's own public comments have only added fuel to the fire, raising suspicions that his motivations may be more political or personal than he lets on.
I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back. But if you remove the roots of the weed, it doesn't stop weeds from ever growing back, but it makes it harder. So we have to really delete entire agencies.
There's no denying that Doge's execution has been flawed, and critics are right to raise red flags about its speed, legality, and human cost. But there's also no denying that bloated systems and unaccountable bureaucracies exist, and that many Americans have long wanted someone to take them on. And let's be honest, both sides are playing political power games. The left and right are using Doge to rally their bases, spin narratives, and score wins, not just on policy, but in the broader fight over who controls the future of government. As for Musk, his endgame remains unclear, but what is clear is that he's becoming a central figure in some of the most consequential decisions in Washington. And that leaves us all wondering, what's really driving him?
I've always wanted to ask you, what is it like inside your mind? Like, is it just 1,000 miles an hour? I mean, are you...
Yeah.
Is it just not... I mean, does it ever stop? Do you sleep? How much do you sleep? What's... Paint us a picture of inside of the mind of a genius.
I mean, my mind is a storm.
Yeah.
So, it's a storm. But I mean, let me maybe tell you something. Like, you didn't ask the question, but I think it's worth kind of nonetheless maybe just elaborating on something, which is, you know, I grew up in South Africa, but my morality was informed by America. I read comic books, you know, played Dungeons and Dragons, and I watched American TV shows, and America cared about being the good guys, you know, about doing the right thing. And that's actually pretty unusual, by the way. So I was like, yeah, you know, you want to be this good, you want to be on the side of good, you want to care about what's right, yeah, so that's what I believe in.
That's great. That's great. Elon Musk.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Hey, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
So, is Doge a much-needed wake-up call, a reckless power grab, or maybe both? You decide. Like, subscribe, and join me next time for more Musk versus the Machine.